My dear friends in Christ, our readings this weekend help us to think about how we are invited to persevere in prayer and respond to God's call. God hears our cries, our desires, and our yearnings. Before I was a priest, I spent a year as a deacon in Boston before I moved here to Omaha. And I was serving at a parish in their Little Italy neighborhood, the North End. Perhaps you visited and are familiar with it. There's tons of really delicious Italian restaurants all around this parish. And when you become a deacon, you get to have the ability to bless things. And people at this parish loved having all kinds of things blessed, whether it's Bibles, rosaries. There's a big, thick book called the Book of Blessings that has a blessing for just about anything you can think of, a home, a boat, a car. Think of an item, there's probably some blessing from the church for it. And so after one Mass one day, a gentleman came up to me and said, "Hey, Deacon Nick, would you mind coming over to my home sometime for lunch? I would like for you to bless my house." This guy, his name was Ricardo, but he told me, he says, "Everyone calls me Ricky G from the Bronx." He was a tough guy from New York and relocated to Boston for work, but a guy with a big heart nonetheless. So one afternoon, I went over to his home. He lived on his own, never had any children, never got married, but a nice guy. And he had just got to know me a little bit. He prepared some sausage and peppers. I got to ask him some questions about his life as well. And when I asked him about, hey, do you come from a big family or a small family? Do you have any siblings? And that was kind of a hard question for Ricky to answer. He said, "Nick, I have a sister, but we haven't spoken in quite some time. That's been really hard for me." There were times in his life when he reached out to the sister and she didn't really respond, and vice versa. The sister reached out to him and he didn't respond. They had their differences growing up, and yet at this moment, he had prayed so long to reconnect with her. So after we had our lunch, I moved into the blessing of his house and put on the stole and got the holy water ready. And we did a couple of the readings and intentions. It takes about maybe 7 or 8 minutes. And as we were about ready to finish the blessing and pour the holy water or sprinkle it throughout the house, his phone rings. And he has one of these older phones, landline, where there's the voicemail that comes up. Gives you a little sense of Ricky G. And lo and behold, his sister was leaving a message and just said, "Ricardo, it's been so long. Something inside me struck me to say, I need to give you a call. I want to reconnect. I want to talk with you. I want to make up for our lost time." After that house blessing was over, Ricky immediately went to the phone, called back his sister, and they spoke for the first time in quite some time. They were able to make amends in their relationship. They were able to reinvest themselves in one another. It was a prayer in which Ricky had been persevering in for quite some time. God heard Ricky's cry and responded to that call. Our readings today also share with us the stories of the cries in which God or Jesus replies to those calls. Our first reading, we hear from Isaiah, who loses King Uzziah, who's one of his friends. And he really wonders, what do I do with my life? I'm unclean. My lips, please cleanse me of my impurities. And God comes to Isaiah, to which Isaiah says, I'm not worthy. I'm doomed. If you knew my past life. But God hears Isaiah's call. God hears the cries from Isaiah and his prayers to become a better person. And this is the moment in which Isaiah is called to become a prophet, to go forward and prepare those around him for for the coming of Christ. And after this cleansing, Isaiah has a whole new outlook. He says, I'm ready. Send me. I come to do your will. He has his own moment of conversion, his transformation experience. Our gospel, we have the disciples who are frustrated. They've been out in the boat all day and haven't caught any fish. They've gone again and again and again. And yet Jesus says, let's go out one more time. You've been desiring it. You've been crying for it. You've been praying for it. Let's try one more time. And with Christ's help, they go out into the boat, they lower those nets, and lo and behold, finally, fish are there. God heard their cry. God heard their desire to catch fish to feed those around them. Jesus came to help them through this moment. When I think about persevering in prayer, I often think a lot about the example of St. Monica. Perhaps you're familiar with her. She was the mother of St. Augustine. And I love, too, that these two their feast days are celebrated one day after the other. And St. Monica had Augustine as her son, and throughout Augustine's life, he was never really that interested in the faith. He was a partier. He kind of gave himself to the world. And Monica prayed, after having a dream, that maybe one day he could return to the faith. He could identify as Catholic. And she prayed for 17 years. It's one thing to say it, but imagine being Monica in year 16 and thinking, is this going anywhere? Does God hear my cry? What's the purpose of all of this? And yet she very much, with all of her cries throughout her life, prayed that one day Augustine would see the light. And finally, lo and behold, Augustine had his moment of conversion, his transformation, his call to God, in which not only did he become eventually a saint and a doctor of the church, much of his writings, such as Confessions, are still read today and used in schools and seminaries and churches. He's known oftentimes as the Son of Tears because of all the tears in which his mother wept in order for him to recognize Christ in his life. When we find ourselves in life with all kinds of challenges, everything that's going on in our world, perhaps we have the desire to repair a relationship. Maybe we've lost a close friend or family member who is very dear to us in our life. Maybe we're releasing our nets and we haven't caught any fish. Maybe we're just trying to pray for someone who really needs our prayers. We're called today and in all days to persevere in our prayer, to know that God hears our cry and that God will respond and be with us each and every moment of the way.